Well, that was Anthony Fauci taking the Fifth Amendment one of 111 times during the Senate Homeland Security hearing, refusing to answer any questions about what Fauci knew about the COVID pandemic. Afterwards, the committee voted to hold him in contempt of Congress. Here's Kentucky Senator Rand Paul with me right before the hearing.
We know that the initial estimate by the scientists at the CIA was that this came from the lab. They agreed with our supposition. But Anthony Fauci was able to coerce, cajole, persuade, and dangle money to get people in the intelligence community to change their vote. It's a pardon that goes over 10 years and doesn't have specific crimes. The only other pardon like this in the history of the United States would be what Hunter Biden received. And there's been a lot of questions about that.
Well, now 3 states have pursued Fauci investigations and subpoenas. Among them, Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier is looking into whether Fauci personally benefited, financially or professionally, from decisions he influenced while serving at the National Institutes of Aid. Importantly, Joe Biden's preemptive pardon of Fauci is executed on the morning that Biden left office, just hours before President Trump took the oath of office on January 20th, 2025. That does not protect Fauci from state law exposure. Joining me now, the man himself, Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier. And AG, thanks very much for being here. And let's start there. What about Joe Biden's pardon on Anthony Fauci? Does that touch Florida state law or not?
It does not. I don't know why you need a pardon if you didn't do anything wrong. Dr. Fauci clearly doesn't want to answer questions, but the American people still have a lot of questions, especially Floridians. So I thank Senator Rand Paul for continuing the search for truth. And revelations over the last couple of weeks have revealed a lot. He did not believe a lot of the mandates and protocols that he was pushing. He doubted safety and efficacy of the so-called medical treatments, yet nevertheless forced them on the American people. They've been injured. There's deception. We're going to search for accountability and do everything we can in Florida under our state laws.
So you now have subpoenaed Fauci as part of this investigation, and you're looking into potential self-dealing or profiting from COVID-era policies. Are you saying he took money or new jobs, and that's why he was not saying what he truly believed?
We are most certainly looking, using every tool under Florida law, to figure out what kind of self-dealing was going on. Government officials, they have a lot of immunities under the law. We've got an uphill battle, but where there's monetary value increases and somebody's going aside from their state job or their government job to do book deals, to seek awards to the tune of millions of dollars, that's a problem. Where you have deception and injury and somebody is making a lot of money on the side, there needs to be accountability. So, yeah, we're going to clearly look into this a lot further. And if indeed he's making a lot of money off of this big COVID lie, he should pay for it.
Bottom line, do you believe Fauci committed a crime?
I can't say that right now. We follow rules of procedure and evidence. I mean, I could say generally, I think what he did to the American people was horrific. People died because of him. People got hurt because of him. People couldn't be there for the birth of their first child or the loss of a loved one because of him. And if he is making money on the side while perpetrating this fraud, there could very well be criminal liability. But we're going to start with civil, criminal, everything from public nuisance to deceptive trade to fraud. We're going to look at every aspect of Florida law and do everything in our power to seek truth and accountability.
And I know you said that the pardon that Biden put in place does not affect Florida state law or any state law. But what about the DOJ? Do you think that the DOJ has found any paperwork, or is there any evidence that links Biden to the pardon? Did he actually sign the pardon, or was it an auto pen? And can the pardon be challenged?
I certainly think there are legal questions around the use of the auto pen, whether or not President Biden actually knew what was happening, if there was agency there to execute these things. I know the Department of Justice is looking at this. We're happy to help them however needed. And there could be liability for various things at the federal level. But we're going to focus on the state level. I've been doing meetings with multiple senators in their offices. They've committed to gathering evidence and getting everything to us so that we can do the best job we can to find transparency and accountability for the people of Florida and Americans generally. And I'm grateful to other attorneys general out there that want to work with us on this, and I hope more will come to the table.
Now, I know that other states are also probing Fauci in Louisiana, West Virginia, Alabama, other attorneys general. Are you coordinating with them at all? And after he took the fifth so many times, what was it that you heard that felt that Florida needed to get involved?
Well, we were certainly shocked by his lack of candor to Congress. He says, I'm the science, I'm the guy, you know, I'm the most famous guy in the world is what he's writing in his diary, and yet he won't even answer questions for the people of this country. So that opened our eyes, but more importantly, new evidence came to light about his doubts about the safety and efficacy. He's pushing things on New York and Florida. He's coming down here criticizing what we're doing in the state of Florida, all the while privately expressing doubts over the safety. So this shows the most clear and explicit evidence we've seen that he lied to the American people, and they suffered. And where there's lies and deception that leads to injury, there needs to be legal accountability.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.